Okay, save the best for last. Fishing white sea bass in on the beach. So I'm running a clip here that I've posted before up on YouTube. I just thought that that would be better than looking at my face. Before we get into the actual white sea bass fishing, when you're in tight here, there's a couple things I got to mention, and one of them is that when you're operating in the shallows, there's going to be some rocks that you're going to come across that you could run into, so you got to keep an eye out for those. And another thing is some of the beaches on the backside of the island are exposed to the swell, and they will break. And sometimes, you'll see some long period of energy where a beach looks calm for 5 or 10 minutes, and then a big old closeout set will come to beaches that are notorious for that, or Mills Landing and Shark Harbor. So you want to be careful anytime you're back there operating in the shallow water. So don't let your boat wind up on the beach. I've seen plenty of them up there over the years. So, one of the main things is, when you're in here fishing the shallows, is you need to have the conditions. Otherwise, you're kind of wasting your time coming in here. You can come in here and do some halibut fishing. Over the years, we've caught a couple halibut here and there, not really super consistent, but enough to make it interesting. And so that's fine. They're kind of lazy and they like the calm water, but the sea bass like some water movement, and they definitely like a hard edge break. And that's what's going to concentrate them. And for whatever reason, who the hell knows? But what I'll do is I'll go over a picture, still picture I have here, and point out some things that are of interest. When you're in there fishing the beach. Okay, so there's a couple of things that we can look at here in this photo. The first thing that's going to be going on here is I've got it marked in between the yellow arrows, which is the beach itself. So I know it's kind of a little bit out of frame, but if you look really closely, you can tell by the tide line that it is actually low tide at this point. So immediately to the left there, you'll see a red arrow that kind of marks out a rock that would otherwise been underwater if it wasn't low tide, and pretty easy to hit if you weren't paying attention or didn't know the area when you drove in there. But the most important thing that we're going to be looking at here is that series of 4 white arrows. And what those things are pointing out is the break that we're fishing right there. So if you look, you can see, the dirtier off color water with all the foam in it that was pulling off the beach. And that was the conditions that were holding the sea bass. So we were actually kind of in the center of this cove. The current was kind of running, I guess it would have been to the right of the frame here. And we were casting up kind of at an angle that those arrows are pointing, and working our baits along the edge of that break there. And that's how we got bit. And those bites came pretty quick, pretty much as soon as we pulled in there with those conditions. We wound up getting our limits, and it was one fish limits, and we're done, and we left. Okay, as I mentioned, if you do not have the proper water conditions for fishing white sea bass in close to the beach, there's no point in doing it. You're just wasting your time. And I've got this little clip up here. This is an example of what white sea bass beach conditions do not look like. So this turquoise, kind of greenish turquoise, washed out water that covers a broad area is not the type of water you're looking for that's going to concentrate white sea bass. What you're looking for is going to be a hard edge. We had just pulled in here this day. This was at the end of a tough spring day of fishing, and man, we just needed to catch something. And this was a little reef underneath the Palisades, and I knew we could catch some sargo and some other beach junk in here, and that's what we pulled in for. No intentions of catching white sea bass. That's not to say that one couldn't have been cruising through here. I mean, I hooked a pretty good fish right there, but you'll soon see what it turned out to be. I kind of got my hopes up. But yeah, so just to reiterate things, this is not what you're looking for when you're fishing white sea bass. A lot of people mistake this water as being sea bass water. It is not. Okay, now let me show you what white sea bass beach conditions actually look like. So what we're looking right at right here, this is Google Maps, and this is the satellite view. And we're looking at a picture of Catalina Island. Now I'm going to take you in on the back side, and we're going to look at a little beach here. So let me go ahead and zoom in, and we're going to come up to right off of Ben Weston Point here. So there's Ben Weston Point. I'm going to change this view around here a little bit. So we're looking dead in at the beach there. So there's Ben Weston Point. If you go to the north of Ben Weston Point, and I don't know what this beach is called here, but if you look at that, that right there is what you're going to be looking for if you want to fish white sea bass in on the beach. So let me go ahead and zoom in, and I will break down the dynamics of what's going on here at this beach. So you have this beach right here. Okay, and sometimes when the tide starts pulling out, especially towards the bottom of the tide, you'll get these rips that start pulling off the beach. This is what a rip current looks like right here, and that's what you're looking for. You're not looking for that green kind of turquoise looking washed out water. You're looking for this silty sandy, just like, you know, if you're out surfing at your local beach break and, you know, you get caught in a rip current, that's what you're looking for. So you have this rip current pulling off the beach here, hooking around out to the point, bunch of foam right here. Foam is home, right? Remember that. And it goes out all the way along the point there. Now, I don't know what's going on at this particular time, you know, as far as what the current's doing and stuff. But if I pulled in here and just, you know, I'm just putting a guess out here, I'm thinking that the current is, you know, pulling out and around that point there. So I would like to have my boat. Now, this beach, I mean, it's pretty rocky and it gets pretty kelped in most years. So depending on what your access could be as far as you could get in there, but let's just say it was clear to anchor and set your boat up in there, I would probably want to have, you know, the stern of my boat, you know, sitting about right here, maybe about, you know, 20 to 30 yards off the edge of this break. Nice hard break right there, about 20 to 30 yards off the edge of it, and be casting in this direction. And I would think that, you know, if I'm using like a, you know, 1/4 ounce lead head or, you know, a 1/2 ounce sliding sinker, that my bait would be drifting, you know, around this little hook there. If not, you just fan cast that along the edge, cast into the middle here, pull it out, you know, and just work it. But as far as what the setup looks like for fishing white sea bass on the beach, that is exactly what you're looking for. So now that you know what white sea bass beach conditions look like, you can watch this video and pay attention to the top right-hand corner and kind of get an idea of what you're looking at. But the question is how do you find these conditions? And, you know, that's not so easy to define. I mean, it's a combination of tide, the current, and, you know, general water movement, which pertains to swell and surge. And, you know, what's even where it gets even more complicated is what beaches are going to have those conditions and when. I mean, that's kind of anybody's guess. You kind of need to you know, just go out and fish and spend the time out there, and you'll kind of get a feel for things. It's not something I can really tell you. I mean, I could show you, you know, like right here in the video what it looks like, but it's not something that, you know, I could really tell you. You just got to kind of cruise the shallows. And one thing I can tell you though is that for me, now I don't know, you know, if some of you guys know, you know, let me know. You can put something in the comments. But for me, I seem to do the best on an outgoing tide. And I'll show you a example of the tide charts and when I kind of seem to find, you know, conditions pulling off the beach that are going to, you know, concentrate and hold white sea bass. What we're looking at here is a tide chart, and this could be a tide chart for any day. over the years, I've found that white sea bass beach conditions tend to materialize towards the end of an outgoing tide. Now, for some of you guys, I don't know, maybe you're seeing different things, but that's just what's kind of worked for me. And on this tide chart right here, I kind of have that highlighted in the yellow. And, I can't really tell you, uh, what beaches are going to work on any given day. I mean, it's just a thing that after years and years of doing it, I kind of have an idea of where I want to go to. Depending on what the conditions are. If the wind's blowing a certain way and the current's going a certain way, there's certain places of the island that I like to fish, and I'll just kind of go there. But the best thing to do is just go out there fishing and just poke around, and at some point you'll figure it out. Sorry if that last bit seemed a little vague, but that's the part of white sea bass fishing that you really got to put your time in and kind of figure that stuff out on your own. So let me go ahead and I'll show you the tackle that I use when I'm fishing on the beach. It's pretty basic stuff here. So go ahead and take a look at it. Okay, here's the setup that I'll use when I'm fishing the beaches for white sea bass. So this is a 9-foot casting rod with a 400 size bait caster reel on there. I've got this one loaded with 80-pound Spectra, but it doesn't have to be 80 pound. 65 pound would be fine, and you can fish all mono if you want. 25, 30 pounds should be good enough when you're fishing on the beaches. And as far as what we got tied on here is on this rod right here, I've got about a 3-foot piece of 30-pound leader. And then I'll usually use this type of lead head, painted pink. I like pink nail polish. I like that. And what I'll do with that is I'll cast this lead head out to the conditions. And, you're usually going to be using anywhere from a 1/4 ounce to 1/2 ounce. The depths are relatively shallow. Your boat's usually going to be anchored in less than 30 feet of water. 30 to like 15 feet of water is where you're going to be sitting. And, you could be fishing as shallow as 6 feet of water, but, it's usually going to be 15 to 20 foot, somewhere. So, you don't need a lot of weight to get down. But anyways, what I'll do is I'll cast the lead head out, and I'll cast it to the edge of the conditions. I'll let it sink to the bottom. And then what I'll do is I'll just kind of drag it, keep the rod tip low, and I'll drag it 2 feet at a time. And wind the slack out and let it sit there 5 seconds or so. And then just keep repeating the process. And then, every so often I'll lift the rod tip up and I'll lift the bait off the bottom there, 1 or 2 feet, and let it settle back down and just work it really slow and methodical. And it works very well. Catch a lot of sea bass and halibut that way.